Welcome to the Gangster Life. What you are about to witness is a dramatized account inspired by real events from Harlem, 1954. No history book will tell you. Thursday, the 8th of November, 1954. 2:31 inches the morning. A 12-year-old boy named Willie was carried through the doors of Harlem General Hospital. He was burning with fever, barely breathing. The nurse at the front desk looked up, looked at Willie, looked at the man carrying him, and said two words, "Not here." Willie died before sunrise, and the man who had carried him through those doors was Bumpy Johnson. He stood in that waiting room for 4 hours, not crying, not screaming, just thinking. By the time the sun came up over Harlem, the plan was already complete. Harlem, 1954. 9 years after the end of World War II, black men had fought for this country in every theater of that war. They had bled in the Pacific. They had died in Normandy. They had come home to a country that still would not let them through the front door of a hospital. This was Jim Crow medicine, not just in the South, right here in New York City. Harlem General Hospital had been built in 1921. It occupied an entire city block on 136th Street, 4 floors, 200 beds, a full surgical wing, and a policy that had been in place since the day it opened. White patients on floors 1 through 3. Black patients, if they were admitted at all, in the basement. The colored ward, 12 beds, no windows, 1 nurse for every 8 patients. The equipment was whatever the upper floors had discarded. The bandages were reused. The medication was whatever was left over. It was not a place of healing. It was a place where people went to die quietly so as not to disturb the patients upstairs. Harlem General was owned and operated by one man, Dr. Edmund Hargrove III, 61 years old. Harvard Medical School, class of 1915. His family had owned half of Upper Manhattan since before the Civil War. His grandfather had been a senator. His father had been a federal judge. Edmund Hargrove III was not just a doctor. He was old money, old power, old certainty. The certainty that some people mattered and some people did not. Willie had no last name that anyone knew. He had appeared on the corner of 116th and Lenox Avenue in the spring of 1952. 10 years old then, sleeping in doorways, eating from garbage cans. The first morning Bumpy saw him, he stopped. He reached into his pocket and pulled out $2. "You eat today?" Bumpy asked. Willie shook his head. "Come on then." He took him to the diner on the corner. Eggs, toast, orange juice. Willie ate like he hadn't seen food in days. Because he hadn't. After that, it became routine. Every morning, Monday through Saturday, Bumpy walked past that corner on his way to the office. Willie was always there. Bumpy always stopped. Sometimes money, sometimes food, sometimes just a few words. "You staying out of trouble?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Keep it that way." It was not a formal arrangement. Bumpy never took Willie in, never made promises he couldn't keep. But everyone on 116th Street knew Willie was under Bumpy's protection. And in Harlem, 1954, that meant something. By the fall of that year, Willie was 12. He had grown 2 inches. He was sharper, quicker, more alive. He ran small errands for the merchants on the block. He swept stoops for a nickel each. He was building something from nothing, the way Bumpy himself had once done. On the evening of the 7th of November, 1954, Willie collapsed on the sidewalk outside the barbershop on 116th Street. His skin was on fire. His breathing was shallow and fast. Marcus Webb happened to be passing. He scooped Willie up without hesitation. "Get Bumpy," Marcus said to the man beside him, "and get the car." Bumpy was at his apartment on Edgecombe Avenue when Marcus called. He was dressed and out the door in 4 minutes. They drove to Harlem General, the closest hospital, 4 blocks away. Bumpy carried Willie through the front entrance himself. The waiting room was half full. A woman with a crying infant, an old man with a bandaged hand, 2 white teenagers who had been in a fight. The nurse at the front desk was a woman named Patricia Caldwell. She looked up as Bumpy approached. She saw Willie pale, burning, barely conscious. She saw Bumpy, and she said it without hesitation, without shame, without even lowering her voice. "Not here. Colored entrance is around the back." Bumpy looked at her. "This child is dying. Colored entrance, around the back." Marcus stepped forward, his voice tight with rage. "Did you hear what he said? The boy needs a doctor. Now." "Sir, I'm going to ask you to lower your voice or I will call security." Bumpy put his hand on Marcus's arm, not to stop him, to steady himself. "Where is the colored entrance?" Bumpy asked. His voice was so quiet the nurse had to lean forward to hear it. "Left side of the building, down the alley, basement level." Bumpy looked at Willie in his arms. He looked at the nurse. He looked at the 2 white teenagers sitting comfortably in the waiting room chairs, and he walked back out into the night. The colored entrance was exactly what Patricia Caldwell had said. Left side of the building, down the alley, basement level. A metal door with a handwritten sign taped to it. "Colored ward. Knock and wait." Bumpy kicked it open. Inside, 12 beds in a concrete room that smelled of mold and old antiseptic. 8 of the beds were occupied. One nurse, a young black woman who looked like she hadn't slept in 2 days, looked up in alarm. "Please," Bumpy said. "The boy is sick." She moved immediately. She was competent. She was caring. She was doing the best she could with equipment that belonged in a museum and supplies that ran out every Thursday because the hospital didn't reorder for the colored ward until Monday. This was Wednesday night. She had no fever medication left. She had no IV equipment. She had aspirin and prayer. She worked on Willie for 2 hours. Bumpy sat in the hallway outside. He did not move. He did not speak. He sat with his hands on his knees, and he thought. At 4:47 inches the morning, the young nurse came out. She didn't have to say anything. Bumpy saw it in her face. "I'm sorry," she said. "I did everything I could." Bumpy nodded. "I know you did." He stood up. He straightened his jacket. He walked back down the alley and out onto 136th Street. The sun was just beginning to come up over Harlem. Marcus was waiting by the car. He saw Bumpy's face and said nothing. They stood there together in the early morning silence. Finally, Bumpy spoke. "Find out everything about Edmund Hargrove. Everything. His finances, his debts, his board of directors, his vulnerabilities." Marcus looked at him. "What are you going to do?" Bumpy looked up at the 4 floors of Harlem General Hospital rising above the alleyway where Willie had died. "I'm going to buy it," Bumpy. It took Marcus Webb and Bumpy's lawyer, Saul Levi, 3 weeks to build the complete picture of Edmund Hargrove III. What they found was more useful than Bumpy had hoped. Hargrove was not just wealthy, he was leveraged. His family's real estate empire had made catastrophically bad investments in a series of failed commercial developments in New Jersey and Connecticut. On paper, the Hargrove family was worth millions. In reality, they were hemorrhaging cash. Harlem General Hospital was not just a medical institution. It was Edmund Hargrove's most valuable liquid asset. He had borrowed heavily against it. 3 separate loans totaling $380,000 from 2 different Manhattan banks and 1 private lender. All 3 loans had balloon payments due in February 1955, 3 months away. Saul Levi laid the documents on Bumpy's desk. "He can't make these payments," Levi said. "The real estate losses wiped out his cash reserve 6 months ago. He's been stalling the lenders with extensions. But February is the deadline. No more extensions." Bumpy studied the numbers. What happens if he defaults? The banks foreclose. They take the hospital as collateral. They'll sell it at auction to recover the debt. Bumpy looked up. And if someone were to buy those loans before February? Levi took off his glasses. He looked at Bumpy the way a man looks when he realizes he is sitting across from someone who thinks 3 moves further ahead than everyone else in the room. "If someone purchased those loans from the banks," Levi said slowly, "they would become the lender. Hargrove would owe them the $380,000. And if Hargrove couldn't pay, the new lender would have the right to foreclose. To take the hospital." Bumpy nodded. "Find out what it costs to buy those loans." The 14th of January 1955, Edmund Hargrove III sat in his office on the 4th floor of Harlem General Hospital. To him, Harlem was not a neighborhood. It was a location, a piece of real estate, a revenue stream. His secretary knocked. "Dr. Hargrove, there is a Mr. Johnson here to see you." "I don't have an appointment for a Mr. Johnson." "No, sir. He says it's about your February loan payments." The silence that followed lasted 7 seconds. "Send him in." Bumpy walked in wearing a charcoal suit and carrying a leather briefcase. He did not wait to be invited to sit. He sat. Bumpy opened the briefcase. He placed 3 documents on the desk. Hargrove looked at them. His face went very still. They were the loan agreements, all 3, with Bumpy Johnson's name on them as the new lender. "You now owe $380,000 to Blue Ridge Holdings, which is me." "Fear. What do you want?" Hargrove asked. "The same thing you denied a 12-year-old boy on November 8th, Bumpy said. "Entry." He placed a 4th document on the desk. "A deed of transfer. Sign this hospital over and I will forgive the entire debt. $380,000. Gone. Today. You can't run a hospital." Hargrove said, He stopped himself. Bumpy waited. "A what?" Bumpy said quietly. "Sign the deed, Dr. Hargrove, or default in February and lose the hospital anyway." Edmund Hargrove signed the deed at 11:47 that morning. His hand was shaking. He did not look at Bumpy as he signed. He looked at 33 years of inherited power passing to a man he had spent his entire life believing was beneath him. When it was done, Bumpy stood. He buttoned his jacket. "Dr. Hargrove, you have until Friday to remove your personal belongings." He walked out. He took the elevator down. He walked through the main entrance, the front entrance, the white entrance, and out onto 136th Street. Marcus was waiting. "It's done," Bumpy said. "What happens now?" Bumpy looked up at the building. "We tear out the basement. Every bed, every piece of equipment, every sign. Same standard as the upper floors. Same equipment, same staff, same medication. And the admissions policy?" Bumpy looked at Marcus. "Any person who needs medical care walks through the front door." He paused. "Any person. Send." Harlem General Hospital reopened under new management on the 3rd of March 1955. The colored ward was gone. In its place, 16 new beds on the ground floor, fully equipped, fully staffed, with the same standard of care as every other room in the building. On the day it reopened, the line outside stretched around the block, not because people needed medical care that morning, but because they needed to see it with their own eyes. A hospital in Harlem where the front door opened for everyone. The young nurse who had worked the colored ward, the one who had done everything she could for Willie with aspirin and prayer, was promoted to head of patient services. She was the first black woman to hold that title at any hospital in Manhattan. Edmund Hargrove III retired to his family estate in Connecticut. He never practiced medicine again. But the story spread through Harlem like a fire. The man who had turned away a dying child had been turned out of his own building by the child's protector. Without a single act of violence, without a single threat, with nothing but a briefcase, a set of loan documents, and the specific patience of a man who had learned long ago that the most permanent kind of justice is the kind that cannot be undone. Bumpy Johnson visited the hospital 1 month after it reopened. He stood at the end of the ward for a long time. He looked at the empty bed nearest the window, the one with the most light, just making sure, he said softly, that if Willie had come in on a different night, this is the room he would have gotten. He straightened his hat and walked back out into Harlem. If this story moved you, if you believe that justice, real justice, should never go untold, hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel, because Bumpy Johnson's story doesn't end here. There are darker nights, bigger battles, and moments history buried on purpose. We bring them back every single week. Drop a comment below. Would Bumpy Johnson's Harlem be different today? We'll see you in the next one.